This video is in response to a very angry comment on our Prokofiev Romeo and Juliet video, and it's all about politics and classical music. And this was a comment by the elusively named A, just one word, A. And he says, "That was your worst video so far. Political regime, red plague to mention a few. Obviously you aren't in favour of communism, but no need to tell us about it when we talk about music. You've really got to know history. You've got to understand the inner politics to be able to see what was happening in these difficult times. Throwing cliches is easy." So I'm going to address some of A's concerns here. The first thing I should talk about is our credentials in the classical music, or in the Classics Explained team. One of us is Russian, and at least two of us have studied in quite some depth Russian history and politics. So I think we might have some inner knowledge there. What we're not doing in our Romeo and Juliet video is making any personal statements about our politics or our personal views about communism. But what we would like to acknowledge is that you can't get away from discussing politics, specifically when talking about Soviet classical music. Our video highlighted the fact that the Soviet state was both very supportive to certain cultural institutions, certain composers, but also carried out content censorship. To quote Lenin, he said, "Every artist has the right to create freely. However, we are communists and must not stand with folded hands and let chaos develop as it pleases. We must systematically guide this process and form its result." Now, when Stalin came to power, all ties with the West were cut. Soviet Russia engaged in isolationism like never before, and the Ministry of Culture essentially had an agenda where it oversaw the direction of what was called the Union of Soviet Composers. So we essentially have the Communist Party directing or controlling the direction of classical music in the 1930s. So good music is music that conforms, in the eyes of the regime, to what's called socialist realism, a term coined by Maxim Gorky in the early 30s to convey the struggles and triumphs of the Soviet workers. What you didn't do is indulge in formalism. Now, formalism is music that borrows the discords and experimentations of progressive Western classical avant-garde music at the time. Now, in our video, we talk about the fact that Prokofiev in the early 1930s was quite willing to embrace this simple lyrical language of Soviet realism, music that was devoted very much to the listener's understandings. And this is very well illustrated by Prokofiev's Peter and the Wolf. Just look at how simple this is, you know. Very easy to understand, harmonious Soviet music. But when Stalin heard Shostakovich in 1934, Shostakovich's new opera, Lady Macbeth of the Mcensk District, he went crazy. It's essentially ruined Shostakovich. He was denounced in the state press. Stalin talked about pre-socialist, petty bourgeois formalism. Though Shostakovich survived by the skin of his teeth, many composers weren't so lucky, and we now know quite a few were purged, they were sent to the Gulag, they were imprisoned, or they were executed. Every year, up until our very own times today, we're still discovering degenerate, denounced composers who simply couldn't get their music out there from the 30s all the way until the 60s and 70s. So we would argue that it's not possible to talk about Soviet music, like Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet, without touching on the politics of the era. But we hope that it's this very engagement with the life and the times of the Soviet nation which gives this music such a particular, uniquely, historically interesting sound and perspective.